Hello, and welcome again to another American Photo Trucks post-processing video. I'm Dave Soldano, and I want to thank you all for coming to our Shooting Horses and Winter Scenes workshop. Really enjoyed it. The conditions were perfect, and some of the images that came out of this just amazing. And thank everyone for coming. I'm a little late getting to this just because for the past several days, it's been nonstop, but here I've got a few minutes right now so we can go through this. These images don't require a whole lot of post-processing, but there's little things you can do to take a good image and make it a real eye popper. So that's what I'm going to try and show you from my perspective here, and you can follow along with me. This is me up here in the corner, and anytime I hit a mouse button or any keystroke or whatever, you'll see it right over here, so you'll be able to follow along with me. I'll be starting in Adobe Bridge here. That's what I use for my cataloging. A lot of you use Lightroom, and that's just fine. And I'll be processing first in Adobe Camera RAW, which has the exact same editing tools as Lightroom. And then I'm going to go into Adobe or Photoshop CC. So that's my process, and you can follow along with me and see how I do it. I'm going to start off by processing this image here, 8622. I just kind of like how these two horses are taking the lead here, and I think I might be able to create a fairly decent image out of it. So I just double click it to open it up into Adobe Camera RAW, and there it is. So it's a cool image, you know. I mean, I like the drama here, the horses and the hooves and this kind of stuff. And when I zoom in, it looks like they're really sharp, which is, of course, a big deal if the right things are sharp. Now, you know, it looks like it's a little off here as far as my level, but that's pretty easy to fix. So I'm going to start here I just like sometimes just to hit auto and see what the computer thinks of all this. And that's okay, but it might be just a little bright for my taste, so I'm going to take this about to 40. And the shadows are what I really want to bring up, the side of this horse's face, but I don't want it to look unnatural. And that's starting to look pretty good right there. Starting to see more of him, but you still do see the shadow, and the shadow is important because later on I'm going to really want to show some more dramatic light, and so I need to leave a little bit of shadow there. I'm going to give it a little bit of vibrance for the color, but not too much. I mean, these are beautiful colors. Look at these whites. And my white balance seems to be right on. I love this. I mean, I might take down the blue just a tad and make the white a little pure whiter, like that. And that's about all I want to do with that. Otherwise, that's about perfect. I'll go into my sharpening, and as you can see, I already sharpened this one a little. Take it up to about 60. 1.5. And now watch, with masking, I'll hold Alt and then move the mask, and you'll see it'll show me where I'm masking my sharpness. So I can go just around the edges there if I just want to make things like the eyes and the fine hairs sharp, and that is what I want to do in this. So I'm actually going to mask my sharpening tool. I'm going to go to my lens profile. I'm going to go ahead, and you can see what happens when I choose lens profile. Kind of fixes the bit of the distortion, which in this case you do want to fix because it kind of drops down in the middle, and you want that middle to jump out and pop, and definitely want to take out the chromatic aberration. Those are sometimes those little lines you can get at the point of high contrast, and it'll fix that. And just a little bit of the dehaze for which is kind of just a really fancy contrast. And I'm going to open this in Photoshop. You can see I've already processed this a little bit, but I'll show you how I got there. And I'm going to use Photoshop to crop this. And we'll start off here. I think this is going to look good at 16:9, which is kind of that's like the ratio of your TV screens, your computer screens, and it's good for things along the lines of you call it like your Facebook cover, things like that. So one mistake you can definitely make when you're cropping images and processing them is you can fall in love with some piece in the background that you think, oh, that's a beautiful element that I've got to leave in there. And so you leave it in there, but what you really wind up doing is just taking away from your main subject. So like I see this little peak right there, and there's a part of me that really wants to keep it. Let me see what 2-3 looks like. 2-3 might be the way to keep the best of all worlds here. But one thing I definitely want is I want the focus to be on these two lead horses that are just beautiful, and they're fire sharp. That is about what I like. And I got a high megapixel camera. It's 42 megapixels. So I can pretty much zoom in here without any worry about anything like, oh, you know, it's going to be grainy or anything like that. This is going to be just fine. So I'm going to level it off here, and I'm going to pick this. And that looks about right to me. And I'll hit enter here. That's what we're going to work with. Now it looks pretty dramatic. I kind of like that. Now you can see right here, that's obviously a no-go. I kind of cut the cowgirl's part out right there, kind of cut her in half. But the framing is the most important part, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm going to use my lasso tool. I'm going to lasso around that, like that. Then I'm going to right-click, hit Fill, Content Aware Fill, Enter. And that got rid of most of it. So select, deselect, and now I'm going to take my Content Aware brush, make it large enough. And when you're talking about stuff like this Content Aware fill works just fine. It works great. Here's a little bit of distraction down here that I can live without. Get rid of that. And yeah, I want to let me take a quick look here. I want to make sure that our center is center, that things are in the right place. That looks pretty good. Well, let's work with that. I already cropped it once. And so there we are to begin with, right there. It's a beautiful picture. You love the way they're kicking up the snow and that kind of thing. Some of this stuff to me is a bit of a distraction. You know, like I said, I got rid of a little bit of the junk down in the snow, little pieces of dirt or horse droppings. These fences, I know they're part of the scene, but they're a little bit of a distraction for me, so I'm going to get rid of those. I really want to concentrate on my beautiful horses here. So I think I've got that going on, and it just really wasn't that hard, was it? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my tool here, my Color Effects Pro tool. It's a plugin. It's free. It's called NIK Efex. If you don't have it, get it. It's so good, and it's free, and everybody uses it. It's fantastic. And I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to bring up the image in NIK Efex 2. And let's see, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to something called Darken, Lighten, Center. This thing is like magic. I'm going to grab my center point from Darken, Lighten, Center, and I'm going to kind of choose where I want it'll recreate the light in the picture. Did you just see what happened there? I said, there's my center, and all of a sudden, I've created this kind of more dramatic light for the scene. You see that? So now there's my center. I'm going to make my center size kind of big because we got a bunch of horses here to take care of. I want my border luminosity to be, I don't want it to look like a vignette. And I want that center luminosity to be bright there. So what I've done here is I've completely changed the light in the picture. Now I've made it correspond with the existing shadows, but I've made it more dramatic and, in my opinion, more interesting. See the difference there? And I'm going to take that and build on it. All right? And so now I'm going to go to something called Skylight Filter. And this just adds a little bit of warmth of the sun. Oops. Sorry, you got to go back to that. Let's go. Got to go back to my Darken, Lighten, Center, because if you don't say Add Filter, it'll just replace that. So again, I'm going to put this right about here in this guy's hair. I know that sounds kind of funny, but I've played around with it, and that's where it seems to kind of work for me. Okay, then I'll say add filter, and then I'll go to the skylight filter. And you see how I kind of added warming, a little too much for my taste, but I want to add a little bit. So you see the difference there, off, on, just a little prettier, a little warmer. And then I'm going to go to what's called Pro Contrast. I'm going to take my dynamic contrast and bring that up. Not too much. Too much is going to be more than I want, especially because I've got another layer that I want to do here. I'm going to bring that to right about there, and a little bit of color cast just to make sure it all stays right. And then you can see subtle but better. So you see that. Okay, and I'm going to say okay. There you go. So, and I'll merge this layer, merge down, and save it with the snapshot, so I could always go back to see there to there. So we've seen how far we've come with that. All right, so it's pretty good, but there's still some things here that bother me. The horse's eyes look a little dead to me, and I think we could add a little bit more drama with some of the light coming through these cool manes and the fur and stuff. But the big thing really is just the eyes look dead, and there's a simple trick to fix this. And you know, one thing that's bothering me a little bit before we go any further, I'm going to say filter, camera raw filter, and I'm going to bring down these highlights. These whites are just a little over the top for me in a couple places. They kind of look like they're not a blowout, but a couple places they almost look like it. So I'm going to bring that down just a tad and then back, and you can see the difference that made. And that's one of the beauties of just being able to go back into camera raw filter, which is something they just added about a year ago, and boy, what a difference it's made. And here's another thing that's bothering me right here is this spittle coming out of my beautiful horse's mouth here, and it's nothing but a distraction. Now, a couple ways I could get rid of this. Yeah, I could take my content aware brush and go over it and hit it here. But look, it creates this kind of, I don't know, if anybody were ever to zoom in, it doesn't look as perfect. And I'll show you a better way to do it. And that's with this patch tool. You circle the area that you want to get rid of, and then drag it to the place in the image that you want it to take from for its content aware. And so now you can pick, I want it to have some of those hairs coming down out of the horse's mouth, so it's going to look like nothing was ever there. And sure enough, if I pick these hairs right here and move it over there, then that's a much better edit, and that looks much more realistic. So I'm going to stay with that. And now I want to add a little bit of drama here. Well, first of all, I'm going to undead these eyes, okay, just a little bit. And so I'm going to zoom in to my horse's eyes here, and I notice he just, I'm going to take my clone brush, put it on normal, and very high. I'm going to put it all the way up around 90 and 90 as far as my opacity and flow. And I'm going to grab some bit of white way down here, okay, just pure white. Alt, and I'm going to come right up here and just paint a tiny little bit on the top of his eye. And what a difference that made. From dead eyes to just now he's got a little gleam of light in there, and he looks 100. It's just that tiny little thing, and no one will ever, notice specifically, but it makes a big difference. So Alt, grab a little bit right here, and I'm going to do the same thing with this lead horse. Boom, right there. Maybe give it a little curve right there. And even though you can barely see it, it makes a huge difference. Suddenly now, these horses look alive. It makes a big difference, made a big difference to me in this image. So now I'm going to move on to my Color Efex Pro again, or my NIK tools. And this time I'm going to use Vivesa 2. Come over there. And I want to add a little pop. So I'm going to grab one of my points here and I'm going to put it up in this horse's head, right in that little tuft of fur he's got up there. Move this so you can still see me if you're interested in that. And I'm going to zoom in to right about here. And I'm going to warm up that little tuft and I'm going to brighten it. So almost like it looks like the sun is just really hitting it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of structure and a little bit of shadow. So it's really going to look like the sun is just, catching that real well. And I'm not going to be satisfied. I'm going to do the same thing over here with, I think this one's name was Joe, right? And I'm going to brighten up that mane a little bit. And I'm definitely going to warm it up a little bit. And I'm going to add some shadows. I'm going to add some structure. And I just want it to really look like the sun is just gleaming off this horse's mane. How beautiful is that going to look? So take that right back in here. Let that load and see the difference. Boom, boom. See, so it's really lighting up their faces, lighting up that hair up there, and making it all seem a little bit more alive. Layer, merge down, and snapshot. All right. Now, this is really the last thing I'm going to do to this image. I'm going to add just a little bit of tonal contrast. You got to be careful with this because you can take a beautiful image like this and suddenly make it look like an overprocessed piece of junk. And that's why I like to use this in Photoshop rather than do it in, let's say Photomatics, or other way that people do it, is because I can control the percentage of this that I use. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to bring back up my NIK Efex again. I'm going to go Color Efex Pro, open it up, and I'm going to do tonal contrast. Boom. And I mean, just you can see what happened. I mean, it just adds all that drama, all that detail and everything else, but I don't particularly like what it did to the sky up here. Kind of made it look a little HDR, and gave me some blotches, which just irritates me to no end. And it just looks a little over processed. But I'm going to leave it just as is and hit OK. And then what it's done is it's created a layer here over the top of my regular image. See? So I'm going to bring down the opacity of that layer to where I still get the cool effect of without getting the over-processed part of it. See, so I still get the detail in there and the little extra by only having it about 58%, but it doesn't look over-processed, at least not in my opinion. So I still got a pretty dynamic, cool image, but it's not over-processed. Now, as far as this blotchiness up here, I'll show you what I'm going to do about that. I'm going to take my selection tool, and since it is the sky and the horizon, it's a pretty easy selection. And I'm going to say Alt right here. And then I'm going to hit Layer Mask. And what that's going to do is, first I have to say select Inverse and then hit Layer Mask. And what that'll do is it basically just excludes this sky from what's underneath here, or what's in this this tonal contrast thing. So you notice now it's not affecting that sky at all. It looks like a regular normal sky should. It just doesn't look blotchy. It looks like a normal sky. And so that's my final image. One more thing. Let's go Layer, Flatten. And one more thing, this can be a beautiful thing, can look really cool. I'm going to duplicate my layer again, and I'm going to go Image, Adjustment, Exposure, and I'm going to bring up the gamma correction, which is actually going to look like it darkens the image, but it and does it in a way that adds realism, in my opinion. So I'm not going to do much, only about down to maybe 93 here, maybe even just 94. And look, and it's a subtle difference, but an important one to me. You can kind of see it as I do it, and I might even do a little bit less, just a tad. But this is the way I do like to, instead of just going with exposure, I'll do just a little bit of gamma, and again, it just adds a little bit of punch there. So that is my final image, and I like it. I like it a lot. I love the way the horse's mane's flowing and everything else, and now I just layer, flatten, snapshot, and then I would save it to however I wanted to save it, to a GIF or to a TIFF, or however you like to save your images. And that's that, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was useful to you. And again, thank you so much for coming out to our workshop. This was probably one of the most fun workshops that we ever did, and I'm seeing your images shared on Facebook and online, and kind of makes me proud, to be honest, that such great images came out of that. So, all right, you guys have a great night, and I hope this was helpful. Thanks again for coming to American Photo Trucks Workshop.